This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, Joni Curl. Here. Mary Benton. Yes. Cody Richardson. Here. Andy Patton. Here. Ian Kuhn. Here. Lloyd Colston. Here. Charles Jennings. Here. Paisley Howerton.
Here.
And Carla Gallegos.
Okay, public comments. Any person that would wish to address the planning commission regarding items not on the agenda. Speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. Any presentations for information purposes only. No action will be taken. Anybody here for something off of the agenda? Okay. Consent agenda, meeting minutes. We all got it in the email. Did anybody see anything that needed to be changed? I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved. Second.
Thank you, thank you. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay. Item number 2, comprehensive plan. Josh, I'll hand it back to you.
Okay, tonight our topic of discussion is community health. Chapter 7 in the last comprehensive plan. Basically, this chapter is kind of similar to the community character in its scope. A little bit different. We have a little bit less as a city control over what happens with the healthcare community. That being said, the city does provide funding for the health department, at least some of it, and then also some of the funding for the hospital. So the city does have a little bit of control over that, but not necessarily over individual budgets. But that being said, there is certainly a concern throughout the community of health in general, long before this wonderful pandemic that we're enjoying. And mental health is one of those things too that is covered in here. It's another thing that we definitely have issues with throughout. But that's basically this chapter. Basically, the vision is probably the most important part in what we want to cover. The city will act by influencing the built environment and setting policy regarding city programs and services to enhance the lives and health of our city residents. And it goes on to talk about reducing obesity, increasing participation in wellness, and increasing public education about healthy lifestyle choices, reducing people's usage of things like the emergency room for primary care, and then providing transportation links for walking and biking to try to get people to be a little more active. One area that the city can definitely focus on too, that active transportation, whether that's trails or just encouraging programs like Recreation Commission. But the rest of the chapter kind of just goes over some of those different things. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time with that because we have some guests here that I want to have speak about their different areas. There's certainly a section of some of the topics we've already covered, like housing, how it affects public health, as well as transportation and land use, economic development. We haven't talked about transportation and land use, of course, yet, but we will get to that in future studies. Also, there's a section on healthy food. But then it talks too about Parks and Rec and different safety and social connections. There have been several different studies, different health needs assessments, and I believe that there is currently one ongoing right now, which is part of why some of our guests are here to kind of talk about that as well. There was one done, looks like in 2012. It's probably the most recent one when this plan was written. And there's a little bit of excerpts in there about that, little summary and that. And then there's a little bit of section there about the economics of healthcare throughout the county. That was looks like from 2010. So some of the information there is still relevant and some of it's probably a little outdated. But as far as the goals, like I was saying before, these goals are going to probably be a little more abstract than say what we have for housing, economic development, transportation, infrastructure, because again, we have a little bit less control of the city planning commission. That's definitely can contribute to overall health and well-being of our citizens as a city and as a planning commission. So those are the kind of things that we want to focus on. But yeah, some of the goals here support efforts to improve access to health services. That's something that's ongoing. So probably most directly with SCK Health, just trying to make sure that we have enough doctors in our community. Encourage a positive view of mental and behavioral health. Basically, that's through our schools. That's through Fort County Mental Health Center as well. Of course, we want to help people understand that those services are available. Our police department is very active as well with dealing with mental health. Right now, our chief is particularly interested in suicide prevention, so it's something that they're ramping up as well. Obviously, we want to increase the opportunities for physical activities, which is another goal here. Encourage access to healthy foods. We've done some of that through Rice Cali. Promoting healthy transportation. Again, we want to try to promote our walking and our biking trails. It's something that we have ongoing. We have the trail, of course, on the levee right now, but we also have that phase 2 that will connect make it a full circle. So connect the south sport complex of the college all the way up to Paris Park. So that will be nice to have that full loop. So it's something that we're working on. Still a long ways to go. Those aren't cheap, and we've struggled to get some of our grant funding in order to get some of those networks built. Working on it. And finally, the last goal is here was continue working with the city's partners to create a stronger local economy. We've got to have good health. All these things are nice and tied together, which is why they're all part of the comprehensive plan. So with that, I will stop my rambling. I know we have a number of guests from multiple agencies. I don't know the best way to start this. So I don't know if we want to just take a volunteer from the audience who wants to speak first, but.
I think that's the best way to do that. Do we have anybody that would like to speak on this a little bit? So, anything that you want to say? A little bit? A little bit? I don't know if you've been too long. You've never been in a meeting with me.
For those of you who don't know me, and for those on the virtual part, this is Tom Langer. I am the administrator of the City County Health Department. I also serve as the county's public health officer. I was pleased when I received the invitation to come and that this was on the agenda, because it does come at a really opportune time. Notwithstanding the ongoing challenges that we have with the pandemic, we are right now, in the midst of completing the most current iteration of the county community health needs assessment. Part of that is done out of necessity to maintain one of the hospitals in the community, but in reality, it's nice to do that, and it falls on a 3-year cycle. So this is going to be the third one that I have been involved with. The first one, I rolled into town, barely could find my way around town, and we said, "Oh, we've got to do this, by the way." And I kind of went through that process and said, "This is County. Okay." Since that point in time, now 6 years have gone by. Amazing. And a lot of these things that were spoken to in this document, while it was static at the time, and because of that, it's a little bit stale, it needs some updating, but they haven't changed. And I think the most important thing is very much what you've all talked about. There's a mantra in public health. And for those of you that haven't figured it out, public health is a little bit different from acute health care, and that acute health care will take care of you when you're sick and ill and you need help. My job is to make sure you don't get there. Okay, my job is to promote health, do everything that we can to keep everybody in the community healthy and growing in that way, because the old saying that we have is that a healthy person builds a healthy household. A healthy households build the healthy communities. And that's what we're all about. The question or the problems or the obstacles that we run into from time to time are competing priorities when we're looking to attain a goal that's that grand. We've gone from healthy people 2010 to 2020 now to 2030. And one of the themes or one of the recurring issues that comes up from time to time is, does your community, as a whole, embrace what we refer to as health in all of its policies? And that's kind of mind-bending to try to get your head around it. But in reality, I can take a look at this document and say that our Kansas City does, because it's part of the comprehensive plan. But is it just the words on the paper, or are we putting it into action? And if so, how? For this body, my ask in all of this is, granted, you don't control this document, it has to be updated, but what you do control are those individuals that might come in and say, hey, we're looking to change dramatically something in the community, tear something down, build something up, or whatever. And while you might be interested in, okay, well, what's the cost? What's the impact on traffic? What's the impact, on all these things? The other question that should pop up is, what's the impact on the community's health when this occurs? If that can be added in, then the achieved goal of, are we, looking at health in all policies comes more and more into play. And I think we have come far enough in our journey for better health that a developer or an individual probably should not shy away from that question. What's it mean to the health of a community if we're going to build a new ball field, or we're going to change some things around? How is that going to impact everyone? I recall when I first came down here, the issues that were taking place in the park, the stripping of the locomotive and the redoing of all of that, everything. And how does that affect public health or the community health? And those were questions that I think were answered successfully. And it shows that you guys are really close in that. What we're working on, and by we, I mean the health department, Rise County, and other partners, is trying to kind of even get better at this process. And so one of the things I'd like for you all to be aware of is that probably within the next 90 to 120 days, we're probably going to be hosting, training for your people like yourselves to come in and discuss the topic, hear how how we might tweak it or improve it or get our arms around it a little bit better, and then go back to our own organizations and incorporate that in what we do on a daily basis. The end goal, again, is to make our community a healthier place to be. And if we can achieve health at the individual level and at the family level, that translates into healthier businesses, healthier employees, and a thriving community in times when we hear about all the bad things. And I mean, we can turn on the news and hear about all the bad things all the time. The pandemic has kind of sucked the air out of the room. But before that, it was obesity. It was, the suicide issues and NML, and those are all absolutely important. But sometimes we'll talk an issue to death, and then we'll walk out of the room and say, gee, didn't we do something? And the reality is we did not. We talked about it, but what did we do? And so taking ownership of this by putting it in a policy and then putting that policy into practice, I think is my hope for us all to engage in. And after having this conversation with you folks, I'm going to be calling Taggart and say, I need to talk to folks in Winfield because we want to bring everybody together at the same time. And I think that's probably the most I'm going to add to this right now. And I just want to thank you all for remembering me and inviting me to come down and comment on this, because it is absolutely vital to what you do. And I thank you for what you do and for what I'm trying to get accomplished through the offices of the health department. So
thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
I think what I heard staff was he's got a lot of ideas for it. And we get down to our goals.
to flesh out and how to implement those goals and what the metrics are that we should be looking for. Yes.
Tom, you mentioned some other activities coming up, but back to this meeting, you've seen the goals and actions that we proposed. Are there any tweaks to those or any additions to those?
Lloyd, absolutely. I mean, but I look at this and I say, this, all took place before Tom. I don't mean, he's a household name in the county, sadly. And so the updating of it would be one thing. When you look at the goals and what they address, I think that the tweaks would be really pretty minor, but could have a lot of consequence at the end, because my belief is that we're all pretty much pulling the same direction and on the same page. I don't think there's anybody who's going to stand up and say, damn the torpedoes now, we're just going to go at full speed ahead with anything without first giving it some thought. And so I love the idea of, making things more accessible by walking and by that. And I've got to tell you, I've worked with the state for 10 years before I came here. I've been involved with this kind of stuff before county. I've seen what other communities have done. I've seen what's happening in this community. You guys are doing really, really well in that aspect. I wish other communities would do as well. But, again, like I say, sometimes we'll talk about it and then that's it. That's it. I talked about it, so they're on a good point. I can feel it today because I did. But in reality, what are the little tiny things? And I think those are some of the things that will flush out. And it won't be, it'll be suggestions, but I think it has to be a communal effort where people say, we haven't thought about this, or let's think about this, and then how can we make it that everyone has ownership in it? Because then it will benefit us all, and everybody will be on the same page. We won't have those conflicts that can come up sometime. So I hope that answered the question.
Thank you.
Chair, from my
Yes.
in my note from your comments, you referred to, alluded to, of course, the Cut City County Health Department. You mentioned Rise County. But what I would really think, what I'd like to know from you and others who speak is, on your knowledge base, and I understand we might forget it on the spot, but on your knowledge base and perception, who are your partners? Who are the, and I'll just say from the perspective of Arc City and the southern half of the county, sure. Who are your partners in community health? Right. You mentioned yourself, Rise County, and who do you see as
the other big partners that I've got a part in my role, okay, are both of our hospitals now. Because you cannot, I don't think you can disconnect the two. I see people from Winfield that will come to South Central. I see people from Arc City that go to Winfield for healthcare services. So when I take a look at that realm, I have to kind of include them. The way SEK Health has evolved, now the clinics are, have undergone some changes in the last few years, and now they're kind of back under one umbrella. So they're also quite a big partner. Our local pharmacies, our schools, I hate to say this, but the great things that have come out of the pandemic have been the increased partnerships that we've developed, because we've been forced to deal with something that's been a threat to all of us. And that means that, 470 is a big partner of ours, as are all of the districts and all of the private schools as well. So we've got the educational cohort, the college, Dr. Riddle, first name basis. We don't talk about these things all the time. The industry base, Creek 7, you guys know where they're at. Canpack, some of our bigger employers that are right here in this community that have reached out and embraced what we're trying to accomplish and have partnered with us these partnerships and these relationships, I think, and I truly believe, we can leverage moving forward so that this pandemic, while it's been tragic for a lot of people, will actually have a benefit to our community as we come out of it because of the partnerships and the friendships and everything that we built. And they're a little bit more to the point now where we'll sit down and listen and talk, whereas at first it might have been, we don't have time because we've got to get this new line on, in production, and we've got to do this. When Creekstone Farms calls me and says, Tom, we would like to do a community-wide vaccination event, and here's what we're going to do. Can you help us get this done? That tells me a lot about the impact that they have and what they want to see in the community, as well as what we want to get accomplished. And so that's coming to everybody from the press here. It's going to be released in a press release real soon. It's going to happen within the next few weeks. And so, that's amazing. That would not have happened 3 years ago. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.
Anybody else that has anything to speak on their portion here?
Carrie.
I'll chime in. So Carrie Clay, Director of Cali County Economic Development, as well as Rice Cali Chair. And reading through a lot of these, so Rice Cali, the purposes of the main three things: active living, healthy eating, and tobacco cessation, including vaping and any tobacco product. So kind of now saying how a lot of the projects have built through our rides and our current pathways. So it's, the farmers markets in here. We've been talking the transportation plan and how that is going to fit with our multimodal that we had talked in a previous chapter, but in this one as well. A lot of the fits for the same, and on both sides representing the reduced on poverty, the income where it talks about the higher income, generally is to help your families. But there's a lot of ties now that are going on in the community through a lot of these different projects that really fit within this. So it's kind of, you haven't looked in this in a couple of years, and now it's like, oh, wow, yeah, that's happening and that's happening. We've got this going. So there's a lot of different things in here that really do fit. And the health and health policy training that Tom's referring to kind of fits here as well, because mentions make sure you're considering how health is impacted when you're recruiting a business or doing some kind of a renovation. So really thinking about the health impact. So there's definitely a lot of things in here right now that are ongoing and a lot of community input. The RISE, which we've got several here from the RISE coalition that are actively working on some of these things. So it's kind of neat to see. It's like, oh wow, we are checking some of these boxes on the efforts that we are doing and trying to build in the community and really get some activity going around. So just here to help continue to support that and keep that going. Keeping it free.
Thank you, Carrie. Anybody else?
Jack Dixon, I'm the president of the Arkansas City Ministerial Alliance and pastor at Shepherd's Grace Church. And a component that I'd like to invite you to consider as far as health, I know we've addressed the mental health issues and we've addressed the physical health issues. I'd like to invite you to consider maybe adding a spiritual component to that and thinking about the different ways that we can interact as multiple faiths within a community. I don't know how many of you were present at the closing of the sesquicentennial celebration where we all came together with a community-wide worship, and conservatively, there were 250 to 300 people there that day. When asked in the survey, the community responded overwhelmingly that what they remember the most was the coming together and sharing and the telling of the faith stories and the music that provided that impetus to let us continue to go out. And so I think as we think about the mental component of health, it's certainly important, but I think it's equally important that we consider the dynamic of the spiritual component of good health.
Hard to disagree with that. Thank you, Jack. Anybody else? You want to say something, Brady? Feel free.
Well, from the district perspective for 470, we have a lot of partnerships. Thinking about Rice County, the resist chapters. obviously our connection here over the last couple of years with Tom and his office. But speaking to the mental health side, from the youth services side, continuing to encourage, somebody mentioned the suicide, all of those things, and having opportunities for kids and families to reach out to. We have done a lot of work in the last few years on trauma-informed schools and what that looks like. So there's been a lot of effort from that social, emotional, mental health side of things to educate our teachers and our staff about the issues that kids are dealing with at home in our community. And it's a wide, vast array of various issues. Certainly, we could go on and on about that, but beyond that, speaking in a broader term of health, we have a lot of kids who, from a physical standpoint, needing childcare. One of the things we lack in our community is a pediatrician, to my knowledge. And so I think a lot of our families go to Winfield for a pediatrician. So those are various things that, from a school district perspective, and things that we talk about, hear about families. The other aspect is the language barriers that we face. And so pulling that into this conversation of health and meeting the needs of our community, I think is a critical piece to that.
Yeah. Have you guys seen any code specific as far as the mental health side of it?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think you can deny that. But there were issues that existed pre-COVID.
Right, sure. Yeah.
So don't want to tie everything back to COVID because there's a lot of things that our kids and families are dealing with. And I don't know the number off the top of my head, but we've dealt with a number of teen suicides in the last few years. Mm-hmm. So that is always a priority for us, and that making sure they have someone they can go to, whether it's a school counselor or Fort County Mental Health, all of those different resources, expanding upon those and getting them to schools.
One of the bullet points in our plan is mental health. And to the best of my knowledge, that's been there for several changes in this. That mental health has not necessarily improved, in my experience, in 2 states. And it's in some degrees getting worse. It's a plan in the community to address that specifically. I think Ministerial does, I don't know that health does, but what is that?
The plan. In 2018, when we went through the community health needs assessment, the number one issue that came out of it was the need for enhanced mental health care in the community, because we can see the outcomes of decisions that were made 10, 15 years prior. Sadly, mental health care was one of those things that people never really wanted to talk about. I can tell you all about my heart attack. I can tell you all about my surgery, but I didn't want to tell you about the fact that I had a breakdown. Okay, and so there's a stigma associated with good mental health, or having those issues. And while it was advanced to the top of the list, it was one of those things where even, I'm like, well, how do I even have that? So we went through becoming, going through training to become more aware. So when we would interact with people on our day-to-day basis, we might be able to identify when what you seem a little out of sorts, you seem a little tense, and we would just engage you in a conversation and then try to determine, can I help you, or can we get, connect you? So that's what's been happening. At South Central Hospital, they've had they received some funding for a grant, and a project came out of it. It's called CAP. And I should know more about it because my son is involved with it quite dramatically. But he's the one that's reached out to law enforcement. And it was amazing to us and how they just came right to that because of the fact that they're the ones on the front lines having to deal with this issue. And so when Dan was still here as chief, and then the new chief, they already identified something that we really do need to address. And how do we do that? And how do we identify it? Because jails and jailers are not the ideal place to deal with people that have, emotional or mental instability. And there are still a lot of gaps, way more. But I'm glad to say that as a community, we've at least started down that path. We have a long ways to go. But it doesn't mean that because it's been a slow process so far that we're going to abandon that with a new iteration of the new community, health needs assessment. So those things likely will probably be back, and we'll still look at those as priorities. And I know it's that way for everybody. The hospital deal with it, Fort County deals with it. It's an issue that continues to grow. Resources and funding are always going to be, too short. But I want to speak to that one question of, has COVID added to this? Oh my goodness, yes. You have these underlying issues already, and then you throw the events of the past 18 months, and all it did was exacerbate it. And when I came here, people were also friendly and nice, and they would help each other out. And have you noticed in the last couple of years how that's kind of turned? And the attitudes aren't as friendly sometimes anymore, and people see me and they scowl because of the message I've had perhaps give, and that's sad. And I really truly hope that we can turn that, that we can turn it back again, because it's the smiling faces and the laughing kids, and that's why all of these things are important. That's why recreation is important. That's why it was important to have the fair. That's why it's going to be important to have Arcalala, and it's going to be important for us to have the Walnut Valley Festival. And my role is going to be is how can we make it as safe as we possibly can and still have those things, because there's such an outlet for people that we didn't have, and for them they're so important, and they're what they hang the banner of. This is what life is like in Cali County or in Arc City. And we have to embrace that. And yeah, we've got a long road ahead of us, but that's what we're in this for.
And Jack, I'm a fan of holistic medicine. I agree with the spiritual contribution that is brought to the table. But when you speak of mental health, tell us what the churches are doing in this arena, please.
Well, I think when you have somebody that is, first of all, just deal with the physical issues. When people are sick and they don't have resources, who are the first people in the community that they contact? They reach out to their church. So oftentimes we are the very first people that come in contact with people who are in need of physical health care. When people find themselves in a confrontation mentally, and they recognize that confrontation is with a friend or with somebody that has been an acquaintance for a long time, and they don't quite know how to resolve that, they turn to their church leaders to be able to help them work their way through those pieces. Those are the grassroots parts of what we're doing, and the churches have been doing those kinds of things for hundreds of years. More recently, the churches have become involved, and especially with the abdication of the Salvation Army in our community, the churches have of necessity had to become involved in providing economic resources for people that needed health and healthcare issues. So a lot of our budget from the Ministerial Alliance, a lot of the budgets from local churches go to trying to make sure that the people that have reached out to them find care that way. Fortunately, the community has also stepped up in that way. And because of agencies like Rise Cali, because of what the work that Tom's doing, we are now much more aware of other resources. And so there have been partnerships there. The piece that we're still trying to find a way to tap into, when I first came here, I came in 2007. It was projected that the Hispanic community would represent about 12% of the population in 2018. I think we can all look around and see that has happened. The multicultural aspect of community living puts an additional amount of stress on the ways that people interact. And the churches have an opportunity to break down those barriers and to engage in dialogue that is of a much more forward kind of conversation. And we have the ability, because of the book that we teach from and preach from, we have the ability to be able to move into conversations that will help melt some of those barriers away. So just a few of the things that I think we're actively doing.
Thank you. So it's been proven that exercise not only improves physical health, but mental and spiritual health as well. Is there anyone from this group that has any ideas to encourage or promote exercise, especially among young people?
My name is Landon West, Director of Recreation, Park City Recreation here. As far as, getting them involved, we try to keep opportunity monthly for youth. One thing, since I've been on board, I kind of feel that we fail at adult opportunities. That's kind of been a staple moving forward, is we need to integrate some of the older population opportunities. I don't know, I had a conversation with a lady out in Winfield, and they had just got done with adult soccer, and that's something I think would be major for our community, just because of the demographics that we have here. So tapping into those markets and things that just kind of revitalize and create new opportunities. And Tom, I think you mentioned it too, is when those kids are participating, they're communicating, they're releasing, they're not, isolated. That word just kind of sends shiver up the back right now. But if you don't have a chance to go out and conversate and be social, you restrict yourself, or you turn to electronics. And as good as electronics are, there's a bad piece to them. So for us at our city recreation, trying to make sure that we have as many opportunities for our youth, our community, to get involved into something. That's kind of my goal looking forward. I think for youth opportunity, we offer a lot, and sometimes it's maybe too much, where we're stepping on, we've got flag football going on, and we've got tackle football going on, we've got soccer going on. So, sometimes you miss that, but then we have spring soccer. So I think for youth right now, we've kind of tapped out on what we can offer. I think maybe there's some little niches that maybe we could put into an evening or a weekend opportunity, and with all those things come staffing and expense. But for middle age and older adult opportunities, that's kind of where I see as my next kind of progression to really help our community and to look forward to that. And I guess since that question was brought up, I'll just kind of talk about recreation and tying into partnerships. Lloyd, I'll get you here in just a second, unless I'm moving on past you. But we wouldn't be here without those partnerships. We utilize district buildings for youth activities, just everything through the health and community health, making sure that we're able to provide those opportunities for families to engage in outside. And the nice thing, it is summer, it is outside sport weather, but once it comes inside, we have to get back into some of those other restrictions and really monitoring what's going on and how many, in and out and so on and so forth. But looking forward to new opportunities and new partnerships. I think we're at the cusp of something great happening in our community with recreation. Those meetings and conversations, I think, are soon to be had. And I think just that second phase tying back into opportunity to getting down to the South Complex where the Dow is, which is a soccer complex. We have youth football down there, the college tying in just east of that. If it comes back to Paris Park Pool, Paris Park, Ag Building, IYQ Summer Camp, and it goes all the way up to the high school, potentially for a sports complex up there, high school activities, eventually we could turn into, I kind of look at Derby and say, man, why do they have these hike bikes everywhere on every main street? I kind of feel like they did something better than we're doing, but we have a vision and we need to start progressing down that vision. And with this document here, we have, that's it. And so to continue to strive to move in that direction. And, when people are interested in moving into a new community, that's what they look for. What opportunity is in recreation, or what will my family tie into? That's school and opportunities to engage themselves in sport or recreation is typically the first two things they sign up for once they enter into a new community. And so if we have things that are progressive and they're out there and it's able and easy for people to join, our rates, we have to keep our rates down with our demographics. We can't raise rates. So they're very, low rates and comparable. And it's, I don't know, I get excited about it, obviously. But Lloyd, I didn't want to jump off before I forget.
I was just going to comment when you mentioned the emphasis is on the youth and programs with almost the exclusion of the seniors. One of the missteps that I perceived as a senior in the early steps of COVID was public health came out and said, you need to social distance and stay at home and don't do anything. That's the wrong recipe for a senior, because we need to get out. Thankfully, the answer came apparent within a few months. Senior Silver Seekers with Humana, I endorse Silver Seekers. Our city accepts it. The gym downtown, Anytime Fitness accepts it. There's less of an excuse for us old folks to get out and sweat, but us old folks don't like to get out and sweat. So there's that kind of opportunity, and I'm happy that the opportunity's there, but I'd like to see us focus more on the seniors, because guess what? We're not getting any younger. We're all.
Come back, Silver Sneakers are going, and of course there's a pickleball group. Most of them are the seniors. There's a couple middle-aged folks in there, but they stay very active right now in the summer. They're out outside, but they'll come back inside and they take over when they get there. But it's active activity and then the social aspect, which is major key. So thank you.
Thank you, Landon. Chair.
Yes.
Just a little chaser. I issued the prompt behind Mr. Langer's initial address about others speaking and challenged you to identify your perception of who our partners. I appreciate Pastor Dixon for speaking up for the faith community and spiritual realm of things. Sending flags saying that the Alliance actually has a board certified mental health coach counselor in the community, and developing actually about there should be about 4 or 5 more that, so we're able to go a step deeper than just expounding to the Bible and Scripture with that. But there are other things that not too long ago, I sat in another community group and talking about where we go, envisioning, developing a plan, and the small groups. And the group that I was in, one of the members of that group expressed concern that while we were visioning and things like that, somebody mentioned, I think might have mentioned language and something like that we had no Spanish-speaking persons. 45 people in we had no Spanish-speaking persons participating in that activity at all. And of course, a comment, then I finally said, well, guys, one of the things we have to do is make things like that happen, because now we don't just have Spanish speaking as ESL group we have in our community. We have Hispanics, we have different dialects of Hispanics, we have Polynesians, Micronesians, Guatemalans, you know, in terms of the diversity moving into the community. And so we want to make sure that we have something when we're thinking about that. How do we engage them in the things that we do, and what do we need? You know, are there specific needs for that? We talked about mental health, and we talked from the construct of response to stress and stressful times. But I also said on the CDDO board, and I know that there's a huge challenge in mental health with people who have mental illnesses and it's not just an emotional thing, and the resources available. The hospitals struggle sometimes with providing support for people who have a mental illness or deficiency. The PD does, the public schools do. So, I mean, my ulterior motive behind trying to prompt people to say, that's another partner, that's another partner, that's another partner. You know, I got employers, that's a great one, that's an awesome one to have. But it's because I'm rolling back to the old cultural corporate days and saying at some point coming down to how do we move away from assessments and visioning into plans and implementation and celebrating our progress. We've had some things we should have celebrated about work that you all have done, is to dish out, to begin to identify match roles with responsibilities and say, where does this work happen? And how, and when we get something, what we need to, you know, ring the bell, you know, beat the drum and say, hey, we've accomplished something, and that list begins to look different because it isn't talking about what we think we need, but we start celebrating what we have and what we're doing with it, as opposed to that. So it's kind of a push to everyone to kind of think about who does that, you know, when you're speaking and talking about the needs, who does that, you know, who are the groups around that do those things, you know. So I thought about that, the cultural group that needs to be able to bridge those communication gaps where we have many things, but people don't always understand what they are. The folks that aren't going to get any better, you know, they were born with some mental deficiencies. They're not going to get any better, but what do we do? How do we reach them? How do we do that in terms of health with them and support of them? The partner CDDO is a great partner in that. And the agencies, the providers that give service to them, you know, there's some things like that. Again, and I had ECRC speaking up, I think, as I heard you guys talking. Oh, yeah. And I even listed one, as I was saying, who's a R or role for this. And when you talk about aging population, and would have been wonderful if we even seen tonight someone from the senior center. I mean, I realize that's under the city umbrella, from the senior center talking about things that we do, you know, to promote health among our seniors. You know, we just kind of want to have a broad spectrum of who are players that can move us forward to where we're meeting more needs. I don't know if we'll ever get them all, but that we're meeting more needs than we are, and that we're not overlooking some. And that's it. Thank you for, again, thank you, Mr. Chair, for indulging me that 2 minutes.
No, you 2 minutes.
You're welcome, Charles. Anybody else have anything they want to say? Sarah?
Chair.
I'm gonna stand because I'm short and I can't see up you guys in the back. I'm Sarah Johnson. I'm with Blaine Newton Hospital, and I'm also a citizen of the city of Arkansas City. I was born and raised here, lived here all my life. I worked for Blaine Newton Hospital for about 5 years, and so I just wanted to say thank you for inviting us to be a part of this. To piggyback a lot on what Tom was saying, we are a partner for the Community Health Needs Assessment, which is happening right now. I brought with me a copy of our implementation plan for 2018, and a lot of the themes are carrying over today. So mental health, as Tom mentioned, was number one. One partner that we had identified in that priority was the Cali House of Hope. which helps the homeless population or minor population, people that need, need assistance. And so that would be one partner that you could identify there. And then the second priority was drugs. So meth, opioids, marijuana, that was specifically identified. The third thing was tobacco cessation. That's come up a couple of times, and I think that'll continue to be a priority. Coordination of care between all the healthcare providers. We are doing, especially with the pandemic, we just have an open communication between each other now. It's one of the positive things that has really come out of the pandemic is that we so easily work together now. That's something we're going to keep working towards moving forward. Access to specialist services. I know you guys have access to primary care here. That's one of the things that our hospital provides. As Tom mentioned, we do serve our Kansas City community as well. I would say about 15 to 20% of our patients come from our Kansas City, and especially for some of those specialty services like cancer care is something that we see a lot of patients coming from this area as well. But some of the specialist services identified in the plan was cardiology, pulmonology, OBGYNs, which I know SDK Health has made some strides there. Then the number 5 was affordable health insurance. Or sorry, number 6 was affordable health insurance. Community Health Center serving Cali County is one partner. They also partner in our community health needs assessment. They serve the low income with their scale-based services and also serve the Spanish-speaking community heavily as well. Physical activity, you guys mentioned, and then healthy food. And I don't know what your timeline is for your plan, but we're going to be meeting for our town hall, inviting people to come and provide input on the plan. We're going to present our survey results. We're going to go over all of these priorities again and list them, identify some strategies, and then probably October or November, we'll release this plan to the public. The last time I kind of went around and I did a little roadshow of the results, and I presented to Rotary clubs and Lions clubs and other planning meetings in the county and just kind of shared what our results are. So I would like to, offer that back to you. If you would like for me to come back once we have the community health needs assessment, ready to go, and I can kind of do a presentation for you guys as well. I'm going to put my Rise Cali hat on a little bit. I also am an active member, and one of the things that in my subcommittee we're working on is a kind of a resource directory. So just something that is a county-wide, mobile-friendly, web-friendly, something that anyone can get. Any kind of resources, housing, healthcare, physical activity, utilities, just kind of, if you need to know, this is where you go. And we're working on that with some grant funds to make that happen for our county. And I think that'll be a big deal because it'll be something anyone who has a mobile phone or anyone who has access to the public library will be able to go and find out information on where to go and find resources.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yes, you're the last one. We get our little, who goes first? Okay. I am Kende Stevens. I am currently the youth pastor, Christian education director at the Winfield First Presbyterian Church. I am also on the Cali Rise member. I'm also wear other hats. Currently, we are trying to partner up with a lady out of Wichita for Open Door, homeless advocate. So for Cali County, along I know House of Hope is trying to get, but we noticed that we also need others that can come in and also help with that. So me and her have partnered up. On my resist part of this, I am the champion for for the Resist, or County Rise, the Resist champion, working with the SROs of Cali County and the schools. Right now, we are looking at, I've talked to Chief, and we are all in agreement, and Will Fun is still to bring this to the school board as one of the things that we're seeing with the youth that are making deadly decisions, what's called SAD, Students Against Deadly Decisions, but those that are making deadly decisions in our county, dealing with drugs, alcohol, not, vaping, all tobacco, and whether it's smoking, vaping, chewing, whatever it is, and of course, all forms of drugs. We have that amongst our youth, and we also, like I said, we're wanting to try to work with the school district on implementing a better way of handling in the school in terms of handbook. The state of Kansas Board of Education had made a recommendation back in April, I think it was 2020 is what the report I received, that instead of punishments, they go to education instead of each offense would not be kicking kids out of school or things like that. It would be more of the nurses getting involved, the counselors getting involved, and educating the students on why this should not happen, why they should not be using the product, especially in schools. So it's more the lines of, I should have brought the paper with me, I showed it at our meeting today, but it's more of not, stop punishing students for that decision, because when they get kicked out of school and go home, what more are they doing? They're doing probably more than they were already doing at school. So that's one thing we're looking at working with the school districts on is there is a pilot program that has already started with this new rule on not disciplining kids in that way. Because I know I have gotten some things from students showing where you would believe what kids are doing in school, that even the keen eye of a teacher's missing. I bring this up constantly with my group and the group as the people that's helping us at the KDHE. There has been kids that take just your simple marker, take it apart, put the vape in there and sit in class, and teacher thinking they're just sucking or just biting on a marker. They're actually vaping in class. So you would be surprised. Umbrellas now. A student can have an umbrella and have alcohol, and you wouldn't know it. There are so many things, especially on TikToks, Snapchat, YouTube, they're teaching our children how to get around us adults. And some of the adults are very nosy. I'm one of those adults, and I'm off into everything these teenagers are doing. I try to be, and some of them get mad at me, but that's all right. I'm doing it for their protection. But that is one thing that me as the head of the Resist, along with my team members, with school and everything, and everybody being part of the school, it's hard to get together and do everything we would like to do, or I know we're looking to do, and we hope we'll get off on our feet here pretty soon, and because I don't want any child unhealthy. I had a son that had, that was born with lung problems, and he died from lung problems, and a lot of that was adults smoking around him. So also we need these students to also come in and say, our ambassadors, to help adults understand about smoking and the risk and stuff that they can do to not only themselves but others, because a secondhand smoke or even the vape stuff, it's not as healthy as people like to say it is. So, but that is what I've been chosen to do for Cali Rise, along with some being part of the board, and so I hope that ties in with what is to become of the economics and with the whole health of our community.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything want to comment on?
Is there anybody else on the call?
No, she got the call. I think you guys got some good stuff out of that. Should have.
I have to say, this is probably the most input we've got on any of our topics.
I agree. I absolutely, I agree. Yeah.
That's discussion.
Yeah. The most well-rounded.
Mr. Chair.
Yes. 2 minutes.
Thank you. As far as, I mean, we have a limited role in this, and I think it's great for you and staff to have brought this group together to talk about this on the night and get this much input. But we might want to, as the planning commission, spend some more time talking about a way to move this, so that we go from assessments to harmoniously and consistently a plan and then a program that, that's why I wasn't snubbing the northern half of the county. I was simply pointing out what we as a Park City Planning Commission might be able to do. That we could do something where we might be able to make a recommendation to the governing body to move this. Got a lot of good stuff going. How do we celebrate it? How do we celebrate it and market it, and make sure that we don't bring back goals. What is it, 5 years, 10 years?
In 10 years.
Those are awesome goals and feel like you haven't done anything. They've done a lot.
Yeah, a lot has happened on this, and I have been, like I've said, every time we get into one of these meetings, that, I want to see, hard goals and hard metrics.
Right.
For the city to hit on this.
I thought you might like this.
And that's, yeah, exactly. So that's no change on this one. And I think, that's the only difference that I'd like to see is, as we talk about each one of the individual goals in here is, a little more hard numbers on what to do to get there. I think these goals are good goals. They don't need to be changed very much from 10 years ago. We just need.
Or about the actions.
Exactly. Some specific actions that we need to see off of this. And I think we've got a lot of those ideas from the crowd tonight, from our guests. So, yes, what?
I sit on a number of committees and around the nation, and it's always disappointing when I sit on one and there's no observable impact from meeting to meeting. And I'm happy to be sitting in this chair and hear our audience say, I saw this, and yes, you're doing this. So not a pat on our back, but thanks to the community for being as participating as you are. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely right.
So we would, again, I'm thinking that rather than protracting, I know what a fan you are of long meetings.
Yeah.
Set aside a portion of time, in a shorter portion of time next one. But to say, what would that look like? I mean, number one, is the municipal, is it the umbrella? You obviously have another taxing jurisdiction here. Are they the umbrella? And then underneath that, I think it just needs to be so, instead of having everybody marching forward in their own battalion, but not necessarily having a rally point, we might do well to, because in talking, Rick Center said, hey, you guys didn't mention me. I didn't hear specifically say, unless you said it, sir, I didn't hear specifically say Fort County. I don't think I heard anybody say Fort County when we talked about it.
When I couch the term mental health, it's kind of an all encasing umbrella. Fort County, of course, is one of the organizations that does receive, funding from a local tax base as well for services, and much like the health department does. And I want to speak to that because I want you to understand your ownership in it. Okay. Each year I go before each of the three organizations or the governmental entities that came together to form the Joint Board of Health. That's the county, the city of Arkansas City, and the city of Winfield. And each year I put in a budgetary request for them to help us fund the things that we do. And you'll hear a lot about this, and it's going to be in the paper again because nothing says good job like a 15% reduction in funding. But it is a reality, right? It is a reality of the lives we lead, because I'm a taxpayer too. And I want my elected officials to hold people accountable. And what I like to be able to show what we do, how we impact the community. Fort County Mental Health has that same obligation. We do interact with them, we understand. But here again, we're in different realms, much the same way like Sarah says, we will partner with the hospitals on a lot of things, but I'm not in the hospital directing patient care. I'm not at Fort County directing mental health services. So when we talk about that, we know where those services are provided, and we try to tie people to them, and we support them, and they support us in partnership. But it's difficult, and when we say there are gaps, there are big gaps, large ones that are basically resource-based. It costs money for those types of services to be provided. And I'll be honest with you, in my assessment only as the public health officer, we don't have enough of that service in our county. We could double it and still probably be lagging behind, much the same like we don't have enough physicians here. Somebody mentioned we don't have a pediatrician. We're always looking to try to attract that. That's why all these things are so very important, because if we can show prospective individuals that want to come to County what life is truly like here, then they are more prone to come here, to set up practice here, and to become part of that community. An interesting quote that was given to me is, remember, Mr. Langer, this is County. I sat there and I thought, what does that mean? This is County. Am I to take that in a negative light, or am I to take it in a positive light? Because it was kind of thrown at me on the one hand. They didn't like what I was saying. Remember, this is County. I'm like, I don't ever forget that. And so the challenge is, how can I make that, remember, this is County. That's the emphasis, is these things that we're doing is County. And the fact that we can do this, and we can make these wonderful conversations even occur, I think is, part of what makes us a really unique place to be.
So with my last 20 seconds.
Go ahead.
Sandy Staten, who was a professional and personal development person when I worked in corporate for Conoco, had these little nuggets. One of them she said, it ties right into what she says, a taxpayer who is also a service provider is never wish for, taxpayers, never wish for more than you're willing to work for. Okay? Everything comes at a price. Everything comes at a price. But again, in this dialogue, in this discourse, what I was really kind of flagging was, as people begin to talk about services that they provided or gaps or whatever, we see those things, and nobody else did. I'm sure everybody else in their minds that I did, because I can't remember 8 seconds I served. Is the role of responsibility thing helps us from keeping things to continue to be in the gap or fall in the gap. And so if we move this again from dialogue assessment to plan to some consortium that says, and this is how we march forward, and whether it's a chorus that sings that all together, 2 seconds, or just, no, I'm sorry, but however you do it, I'm just saying that there needs to be a mechanism that says that, next year we're going to be talking about what we've done and what we need, and that we have an audience with the Planning Commission who's going to make a recommendation to the governing body, and we need to have our sheet music all laid out, and that's fine. And then take it to Winfield and do the same thing. Just insert Winfield instead of our city and keep going. But I'm just saying, wherever we go in the county, so that we get that message, but we see a group that's moving and somebody, because there's somebody that will hear about this and say, I wish I'd been there. Yeah.
And one of the things that you hit on was something that I think we do need to see out here is we need to see a lot of cooperation from the whole county on this, because the two cities and the rest of the county are too intertwined for us to just focus on the one size. So, you know, when you said you wanted to talk to taxpayers, well, I think we all need to, because we need to have that, you know, whole county working towards the goals on this. Because if one is not doing it, it's not helping as much as it could be if just one of us is doing it. So, yes.
We have mentioned our part for the seniors. And I want to mention County College and the Golden Tigers program. It is an opportunity for us old folks to get out and not sweat it, but do something, learn something, keep the mind sharp. They have field trips, keep the body going, educational stuff, right out here in little Lark City, Kansas. So the registration, I'll mention, is August the 24th, and right down here at Cali College. So if you're over the appropriate age, then
I got my mailer.
I got my card. Thanks.
So, Tom, you mentioned there was a lack of mental health care professionals in this area.
Oh, yeah, there are.
What would you suggest you do to encourage those type of people in this area?
You know, I think that is an entirely, it's a subject that has to be kind of examined on its own, and it has to include what I would consider the big players. You know, we have to have hospital administration sitting down and talking about the needs. How could you attract more psychiatrists, more social workers, you know, to want to come and establish practice here? Or is it something that we could look at a strategy where you contract them to come down a couple of days a week even, you know, there are a lot of different methodologies that it can be looked at. Again, the question is, how's we going to pay for it? Where's it going to go? And that to me is always kind of defeatist. And Charles, I'm going to throw this at you. You know, we have a great capacity to dream. We have a great capacity to say, this is how it should be. This is the vision that we have. But we get hampered so much because we say it can't happen, or we'll never be able to afford that. And I think that's kind of going at it the wrong way. Because one of the things you find out is if you have something that's really truly a valued service, people will step up and do it. They will step up. It is what do people value, and that I think is what we need to uncover. We need to find out what is it that you value the most, because that is where you're going to place not only your faith, but it's also where you're going to place your treasure. And that's how we accomplish things. And that is the hard part. That's the part of, you know, what is it that we have? And do we have enough people that say, this is that much of our priority to us to make that happen?
Do you feel like it's a lack of facilities?
I think the facility they have is fantastic. I think it's probably more care. Do we have enough individuals that can care for the population that is our size? You know, a physician can see X number of patients when you break it down. A nurse can see so many people when you break that down. We have a larger demand than we do that supply of care. And so you have to increase.
I mean, as far as attracting those professionals, we have facilities.
I think, well, you know, and here again, that's part of that conglomerate that has become Fort County. There are other small ones around. I know South Central, I think, they contract out in their facility, the mental health care unit, okay? So again, that's because we don't have enough physicians locally that we can just assign and staff ourselves. And I'm not sure, Sarah, you can help me with that. I'm not sure how William Newton does it because I haven't had that conversation with them.
Yeah, we don't have any
Yeah.
facilities for mental health.
It's probably diverted to a place that can't care for it. That's another one of those things I think that's a disservice a lot of times because, you know, we've got 34,000 plus people in Cali County. And how many beds do we have in the hospital?
Ours up to 25.
25, we have an additional maybe 30 or so here. So, you know, you have 34,000 people and we've got 60 beds.
The idea of,
You know, and it's the same kind of thing. Now, hopefully on days when we're all healthy, you know, it's good. But look at what's happened when we haven't been. And, you know, and we're boom. It's like, I'm here checking in. We're going to hold you until we can find you a room somewhere else. And you're going to end up in Hayes, you can end up in Wichita, you can end up in Topeka, you can end up in Kansas. You know, not because they don't want to care for you, but because we just don't have that capacity. And so we pay for it one way or the other.
And our Park City Hospital is just geriatric site.
Yeah.
So there's no inpatient facility here for adults.
Yeah.
given the expansion and almost the overnight explosion of telemedicine, I'd be surprised if there weren't mental health providers doing telemedicine.
I think they do. I think they do quite a bit. I don't know though that we've ever maybe, you know, explored that and say what's available. Those, like I say, those are all conversations. You start peeling that onion back and saying, okay, what, you know, this is a part of it. But I think the other part of it is why are we as depressed as we are? You know, let me tell you, you know, 18 months of pandemic response, it will drain you. You know, the drilling down and the reflection of self and of community to say why. You know, I have a 2.5-year-old granddaughter. That's her favorite question. Why?
And going along with that,
A 9-year-old, that's her favorite question. So
with the explosion of telemedicine, I see an explosion in the faith community. 3 weeks ago, Southeast Christian Church had a ER doctor preaching about suicide and providing the book for free to people who would listen to that. There's all kinds of ministry going on in churches, not just in our city, but all over the world. We thought March 2 years ago that the church was dead because the government was going to shut their doors, and the ministry has exploded. They're feeding people, they're ministering to people. So it's not just psychiatrists, but it's also Christian counselors and therapists and the whole gamut of help. That if you want it, 211 is not a hard number to remember. You can use call 211 and they'll tell you who is providing the service in your community.
it's fair.
Just add something on a comment you were saying a minute ago. It's for the countywide perspective. So 2005, Cali first led the Vision 2020. 2020 came and went. So the iterations of all of this. So kind of moving forward on your thought about the countywide. So in 2019, we tried to get a small committee just to kind of get together, and then we all know what happens. Here we are today.
Yeah.
So the plan and what the goal is to do now that it's kind of these things that it worked out quite well anyway. Now, last year Winfield did theirs. We've got the community health assessment going. We've had several other different kind of groups already doing their plans. And now with this comp plan for the city is to melt those all together. So instead of us having to redo everything, all the hard work you guys are doing,
Right.
we can just take what is there, find those commonalities and build that countywide plan.
Yeah.
So just to let you, I mean, that is what the plan is. So I've been gathering some things to start pulling that together. So the plan is to then have another kind of just a committee just to review those and put together. Yeah, so it's that comprehensive plan that's already utilizing most of the communities and finding those overlaps. And really, so to me, the first it was people, place, health, economy, and culture. So it still holds together all the things that we've been talking about.
How do you choose your member?
My struggle I usually find is just inviting people and whoever shows up.
Yeah.
Could be.
Right.
I don't know if usually pulling me, twisting arms, you know. So, but what makes sense would be, you know, a couple from this group, a couple from what the Winfield, a couple from each of these different groups that know these plans very, very deeply to kind of see where we can start building this this countywide efforts and working together because it makes perfect sense. So, I mean, that's Rise County came from, it was the health committee from Midland Lane County. And all of the work that it takes time to build these things, but I mean, all of the things we talked about that Rise has really began to impact these last few years. And it's been very, all that time and.
It began, we knew that we needed resources, and so we applied for funding for Blue Cross Blue Shield in the very first year. We came so close, but we didn't get there. We were just, we were the next one in, and it was the best thing in the world that happened because it made us come back and look at ourselves more. And we went from the Cowley County Community Healthcare Coalition, that rolls right off the tongue. So it wasn't quite long enough to say, man, we got to change this because we're getting beat. We got to rebrand it. And so what's RISE stand for, sir? I can't.
It stands for raising awareness, improving health, supporting collaboration, and energizing communities.
There you go. That's what RISE. So RISE is not a specific, but it is the coalition. And so that's why we have this broad and diverse membership base. I mean, basically anybody can get into that. And then we can engage the community through that organization and try to accomplish these good things. And, if there's no denying the impact that those dollars that we've already brought in have made on our community and will continue over the next few years. So, but then there's that sustainability issue that comes after that, and those are the next things that we have to plan on and work for. Because it won't, we don't want to roll the sidewalks up when funding runs out. Right. We want to continue to move forward because I think people will then maybe, I don't say expect it, but it will become so much part of their life that they will demand that we maintain those. Thanks again. It's been a nice change to talk about something like this that many of us have a passion for, and anything that I can do to assist you on your journey as far as making these things more user-friendly and again, to put them into action. And even for accountability purposes, which is, I think, a lot of times when we can write a great document.
Yeah.
Put it in a notebook, it's in on a shelf.
Yeah, and I
like that.
Look, I did that 10 years ago, we did this, and look at this.
And what have you done?
Yeah, I said in the beginning, this one isn't going to collect us.
Yeah, we're going to use it, and I think that's great. And remember, like I say, we're on the same page with you. I think it's just perfect time.
Thank you.
And remember, this is just one chapter.
That's right. Chapter 7, 12, how many? Oh.
I do want to thank you for your comments on Rise Kelly, because as you said, what's the umbrella? I think that is the umbrella. I work with all of you in that coalition for the last 5 years.
We can give you a long list of partners.
But there's some people I think that we missed on this. Some of them were invited, they just weren't available, but there's some entities I think we want to reach out. This is not the end of this conversation tonight. I think this is just a starting point. And as Sarah said, it's an ongoing effort probably to the fall. So we'll probably touch base on this, but just a couple of things I wanted to mention that didn't get mentioned tonight for the record, so we don't forget about them. We've got to have SCK Health's input. I mean, all departments are important, but that's the city-owned hospital. That's obviously been a challenge for us in the last 5 or 6 years. And we've got to get Jeff Norman here to talk to you guys directly about the future of the organization. If we don't put that in the plan, then what are we doing? It's kind of my thought. Yes, they were invited. Shayla was on.
Shayla was on the call.
Yeah, we may need to schedule something special for them. And then additionally, the community health center was mentioned, I think, but I think, I know they're applying for that grant to turn Lincoln School into a second site. Assuming they get that, that is a huge focus that we probably need to throw some weight behind as a city. It's not obviously the school district's involved with that too. So we probably need to get Dave. He's on vacation, I think, this week. So I'd like to get Dave Brazel to talk to you guys a little bit about that effort at some point. And then the mental health side, Ian, to answer your question, I think it's a complex issue, but I do think we probably need to visit the police department. There is actually a county affinity project meeting tomorrow at 3. I can send out the info if anyone's interested in learning more about what they're doing, but I think that's SCK Health reached out to all of us, and specifically the police department, I think 2 years ago now, to kind of start talking about that. And I know they're in the middle of kind of restructuring and getting organized similarly. So it's probably a good time to have that talk. But, there's issues at the state level too. I mean, there's only 2 hospitals in the entire state that they can commit people to, and they just send them right back constantly. And it's kind of a revolving door thing. So there's things we can do as a local community, but there's bigger issues that we have to be aware of too. So those are just 3 things that jumped out at me here that we probably need to kind of keep talking about as we move forward. I was hoping to walk away tonight at least though with a little guidance from the Planning Commission on where you want to go with surveying. We haven't done one in a couple of months. The last one we did was the housing. It was not the greatest turnout, so I'm going to be doing some stuff to try to gin that up a bit. I'm working with Kevin to get some text blasting out to see if we can't get some more enrollment. But I do need topics and maybe a plan of where to go, because I'd really like to start rolling out every 3 weeks minimum to get our money's value here for the rest of the year. So is there a particular, we've only done housing and economic development, to be honest. So every other topic in every other chapter in the plan, we've yet to scratch. I was kind of holding off because they were telling me they wanted to do one on the pool, and then they pumped the brakes and don't want to do the pool. So I'm back to you guys. I'm just going to let you guys drive the process because I'm not getting real clear direction for other folks.
I'd sure like to do a Parks and Rec / pool survey. I think that needs to be the next thing.
We're really probably looking at more like 2 or 3 of those, and the pool is probably its own animal, but that committee is going to start meeting tomorrow, so I'm going to let them figure it out with the partners and give staff a little more direction before we do that outreach. But the rec center is an issue, obviously, that you're talking about. Still working on parks. We've got 3 more parks to visit the beautification board, but I've got enough info right now I could pull together.
Okay.
Wilson Park may need to be its own thing. We've got a disconnect right now between the plan that was established with citizen input and I think where the commission is right now and where the city manager are right now. And I think we need to get back to the public and say, okay, there's certain aspects of that plan that are just probably not going to develop. But I'm meeting with VJ Wilkins next month, so I'm going to get a lot more feedback from them. That'll maybe help guide that. I'm just not quite ready to put that out there yet, but I think it needs to be discussed. But as far as the other parks, we can probably get something put together. Do you want to do something on health, or I don't know. I mean, I think you guys are already doing that, but I don't want to duplicate your efforts poorly.
And I don't see, I'm not sure that, public health survey is going to get a lot of different answers than what we already know. I mean, that's all stuff that we all pretty well understand.
At some point in the next few months, could we have a meeting about emergency services?
You mean providers?
Right.
Yeah, well, so Chris Cannon was one we invited. He's with EMS Education, Kelly College. He couldn't make it tonight, but he wants to come to a future meeting. And I think police, fire, EMS need to be a discussion point because that is the piece that the city does actually have direct control over, and therefore we need to maybe have some specific goals there and how we support these other entities.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. We can work on that. Okay, well, that gives me a little bit of a focus there. Transportation is this whole other beast. We'll be doing a lot on that, but right now we're giving the data to trans systems. They're going to analyze and come back with some things they've seen, and we'll try to dig into that a little more. So later in the fall is when we're thinking we'll have meetings and surveys on that specific piece.
Yeah.
But I want to build back into that because we really do need major community input on it. There is the Rice Cali's been surveying every year. Perception survey of health stuff that we can pull that data, and I'm sure Sarah hopefully will share some of her data. So I think there's enough community input that we don't need to do our own flash vote. But okay, so we'll get started on the parks, so I visit with those boards and get that going.
You said pump the brakes on the pool. What did you mean?
As far as public outreach, like doing town hall meetings and stuff, they wanted to back that up. I mean, it went like 180 because at the pool is like, we got to go, we got to have meetings in the next 2 weeks. And then that was completely.
What was the reason?
They want to visit with USD 470 at Cali College and everyone get on the page together as to what is even the vision as far as the different partners being involved. once that's figured out, then they can actually start talking about strategies to address the pool, and then they want to go to the public. I hope I conveyed that correctly. That was my sense of it. It was kind of a chaotic meeting.
It was very chaotic.
Yeah, you're right.
It was, yeah. So I think we're on our path, and just maybe not as quickly as I hoped.
Mr. Chair, just for my clarification, perhaps, I think that we said we weren't overwhelmed with joy with the response on the housing survey, but we're not ready to move forward. I mean, I think how the housing issue is, we're at wave the yellow flag in terms of where we are in terms of our housing inventory. Are we going to continue to try to get better response out of the survey?
I'm pretty happy. Did you guys get a copy of the housing assessment tool, the final? Did you give that to them? We'll get that to you. Okay. I'm pretty happy with the HAT report that we put together. I mean, there was probably a few segments we didn't get quite the response we were hoping for, but it's a pretty, it's probably the most comprehensive look I've been a part of. I don't know if Gary, what you figure that. So we're waiting on census data. That's kind of the other big piece of the equation.
When is that coming out?
Theoretically Thursday, but that's in a format that the average person is not going to be able to access. So probably more like in sometime in September, where you could actually go to data.census.gov and start searching through that data. But we are going to try to at least get our population count, some of the racial demographics, because that's what's being put out initially for the redistricting purposes. So soon, hopefully.
It's been soon for
months now. But you know, we had the high meeting. I felt like there was pretty good interaction with the partners, and 470 was a big part of that. Didn't really get out of it, I thought, from the state what I was hoping for. But it's a box you have to check. I know Josh is working on the rehabilitation grant, and there's some other housing related partners we're looking at. So, you know, that's documents not sitting on a shelf by any means, but yeah, we need to get you guys a copy of that, and it'll be included as part of the comprehensive plan as well.
In the visit with our housing authority agent down inside the Agency on Aging, recently had a conversation and characterized us in terms of available housing for rent right now. Actually, we're like about 95% capacity. They're wait listing, and actually, are we still recording? It actually said that, well, you got people that need housing, and with the anemic accessibility of housing, they're actually placing people in Wellington, they're placing people in as far away as Ponca City, Stillwater, especially if they're working with their Section 8 stuff. That stuff is nationwide. So if they get on the system, they can go anywhere in the country. So we're actually starting to displace what we're saying. We're looking for workers, we're displacing people from the immediate area because we aren't able to house them. And you really can't have workers if they don't have a place to live.
Right. So yeah, Tom Minton told us at the HIAC meeting, they're starting to look at the bus Ponca now too. There is some discussion afoot about maybe trying to get an apartment complex additional ongoing. I don't know. That's very early stages. But it's a national problem. I was just reading a story recently about they're saying it could be a decade or more before the entire country can catch up with housing inventory, what the demand is right now, what the the possibility is for people that have got income to do it. It's not just us, we know that. Josh, you jump in with the HIV training you're going to?
Yeah, we're going to training on Monday and Tuesday up in Hudson. What that discussion will be on is how to create housing in the downtown area. So that's
something we've talked about
that's one of the
decades, and it's just never coming to fruition at all.
Been a snake in the bites.
Okay. Anything else, guys? Any other comments that anybody would like to make before we get? Yes, Lloyd.
I'd like to mention that the Federal Communications Commission and Federal Emergency Management Agency tomorrow afternoon will be alerting your phone as a test. It'll also be broadcast over radio and television. It's only a test. The world is not coming to an end, but You won't get an app either.
But it is a very random time, if I remember correctly.
About 2 in the afternoon.
I thought it was like 2:08 or something. I was like, what? Why would you do that? Okay.
Just to interrupt your nap.
That's okay. Okay.
Would the chair entertain a motion for adjournment?
Yes, I would. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye. Aye. You're adjourned. Thank you.